One of the questions that I received was concerning the calculation of standard deviation and mean for group data that has classes and frequencies. In this video, I'm going to show you an example. So let's consider that these classes represent scores of tests. This test is out of 60, so we have students that received a score of 10 to 14, and so forth. And the frequency represents the number of students that achieve those scores within each category. On the right-hand side, you see formulas of means and standard deviations, and those are applicable to both samples and population. But if we want to consider those as sample, if we want to see this and consider it as a sample of population, then we probably don't need the formulas of the population mean and standard deviation. So we're going to go ahead and delete those ones. And then one good practice, if you want to calculate, you want to make sure that you have a column that corresponding to each part of this formula. But before that, let's just calculate the midpoint. And the midpoint is going to be basically the midpoint between the upper and lower limits. So lower limit is the lowest point of that class, and the upper limit is the highest one. So what we want to do here is basically to add 10 plus 14. And I want to have the brackets so that these are calculated correctly, divided by 2. So basically the average of these two values, right? Let's delete those for now. So now that we have M, we have F, and all we see here is M and F, but we also have the sample mean to calculate the standard deviation. And that's the first thing that we want to do here. So we're going to calculate the sample mean here. And all we need for that is F times or multiplied by M. So what we can do simply here is that we enter those numbers. And what we want is the frequency times the midpoint. Right? So what we need to add here is the summation, because we want the summation of all these calculations for the observations, M times F times M. And then with that, we can calculate the sample mean. So go ahead and do that. Take this number, and the total number of observations represent n in this case. And that should be, if I want to come back to that first, we got summation. We got 80 observations here. So what we need to do here is simply this value divided by this value. Let's go ahead and do that. Divided by this value, and this is going to be our sample mean, right? Then now we want to apply this formula. What we want to do here is that we have to think of this practical solution, that we want to have a column corresponding to this part. So what we want to do here is that we want to establish this column. If we take it, since we already have the sample mean, we are good to go with this part. So the midpoint should be this one, and this is a variable one. It's going to be this, and then minus sample mean. And this one, it has to be fixed. The way you make that fixed is with a dollar sign. And for that to be calculated correctly, we're going to add the brackets times the frequency, right? So when we drag this downward, this cell, we're going to generate the calculations corresponding to each class. Let's go ahead and do that. Now, one thing that I forgot here is that this is actually squared. So one thing that I can do, I can do the power one, but just to make the things practical, I'm going to just repeat this so that we have it ready for us, and then we just basically drag it downward. So the summation of that is needed for our calculation. Now that we have this part, and we have the number of observations, which is the frequency, we can go ahead and calculate the standard deviation here. And this is not the standard deviation, by the way, this is the variance. So the standard deviation would be the square root of that one, that number, right? So just to make this little correction here, that we know that this is going to be the square root of this number, we can start with the square root. The square root formula here, a command is going to be SQRT. The first part here is going to be this one, divided by this part minus 1. So just to have this calculated correctly, I'm going to put that between brackets. Go. And then you got the standard deviation here.